Not all journeys begin with thunder. Some start in quiet moments beneath starry skies, where forgotten paths wait to be discovered. If you enjoy gentle quests and soft magic, like and subscribe for more bedtime stories. The rain in Ashvale had changed. It no longer carried the scent of petrichor or sang with the rhythm of gentle storm. Now it fell heavy and silent, as if each drop mourned something forgotten. On the worn cobblestones of Greyward Alley, a man moved like a shadow among husks of humanity. His cloak clung to him, soaked and colorless, the way memories clung to the few who still possessed them. Rhys of the Crown Guard, once called Rhys Tarnell, no longer remembered his father's voice or the feel of his mother's hand. Names were slippery things now, sliding off his mind like oil from steel. Yet one face remained. In the collapsing cathedral of his memory, one image hung from the rafters like a last prayer, the Queen's face, half-lit by firelight, whispering something he could no longer hear. That image kept him moving, even when his legs trembled from the weight of stolen identity. He passed hollow after hollow, men and women who stared with eyes like polished stone, unmoving even as rain pooled at their feet. They did not speak, for they had no names, no selves. Only Rhys, among the plagued, still wept. Ashvale was once a kingdom of color, golden wheat fields brushing castle walls, sapphire banners snapping in the wind, lavender oil drifting through markets. Now it was gray. Hollow gray. The plague had begun 2 years ago, subtle as a half-remembered dream. First, people forgot songs. Then, birthdays. Then, their own names. The scholars called it nemesis. The folk named it the Hollowing. Only later did the Queen's disappearance connect to its birth. Rhys didn't remember the connection clearly, only the ache it left behind. He had been her sworn protector. The vow was forged under the oath fire, a magic that bound soul to duty. Even now, when his name was fading, the bond hummed beneath his skin. He would find her. He must. Somewhere beyond the hollowed streets and the silent city gates she lived. If she could be found, perhaps she could be restored. And if she could be restored, maybe Ashvale could be saved. Rhys pressed a gloved hand against his temple, steadying the storm inside. Then he turned west, toward the forested hills of Dunsloe, where a whisper of her trail remained. Dunsloe had always been a place of lesser songs, a wild province where maps failed and rivers changed course on a whim. The locals claimed the trees moved. Rhys had never believed that. But now, as he passed beneath the ash boughs, he couldn't help but notice how the branches leaned toward him, creaking like old bones. He followed a barely visible trail, one he remembered from a time when he and the Queen had ridden through here during a diplomatic hunt. That memory, it was fraying at the edges like burnt parchment, but it pulsed with urgency. The Queen had laughed here. He remembered her laugh. No, he remembered the feeling of her laugh. Like warmth when frost pressed your skin. The Hollow had tried to eat that, too, but emotion, true, raw, burning emotion, was harder to consume. It was why he still had something left. Somewhere among the brambles and the lichen-covered stones, he found a broken campfire circle, half covered in moss. She had been here. He could feel it. A trace of magic, old and trembling, still clung to the air like distant bells. He wasn't alone in Dunsloe. From the edge of his periphery, shadows moved, too fast for Hollow, too quiet for beasts. Rhys dropped into a crouch, hand on the hilt of his long sword, breath slowing. His armor was no longer polished, but it still bore the sigil of the Crown Guard, a fractured sunburst. A faint shuffle echoed ahead. He waited. Then a figure stepped from behind a tree. Small, hooded, armed with a crude crossbow carved from hawthorn. "You're not Hollow," the figure said. The voice was young, female, sharp as flint. "Or you'd be drooling in the mud." Rhys rose, careful not to draw his blade. "And you're not Bandit." A pause. "Too clean." The girl lowered her weapon slightly. Her eyes, wide and silver, studied him like a relic. "You still remember how to speak?" she asked. "Then you're not all gone." "Yet." Rhys nodded once. "I'm looking for someone." She snorted. Everyone's looking for someone. Most already lost them. Her gaze softened an inch. But maybe I can help. Her name was Sarah. Or so she claimed. Names, she warned, meant little these days. Could be I'm a dream, she said as they walked deeper into the woods. Could be I'm hollow and don't know it yet. But she had memories, many by her account. Enough to navigate the dense-low wilds with strange precision. I follow echoes, she said. Places that feel thick with remembering. You can smell it if you try. Rhys found himself listening. Not just because she was a guide, but because her voice broke the silence that had haunted him for so long. As they crossed a fallen log over a narrow gorge, Sarah pointed to the north. There's a ruin there. Old temple. Some say the queen stopped there before she vanished. Or maybe it was someone else. Stories rot fast these days. Rhys's pulse quickened. We go there next. Sarah grinned, teeth sharp. A man with a mission. I like that. But be warned, knight, memories come with teeth now. Not everything wants to be remembered. The temple wasn't on any map. Its spires were broken, swallowed by ivy, and its doors sagged under years of rain and rot. Yet even ruined, it sang of power. Rhys stepped over the threshold and felt the air hitch, like a breath caught between sobs. Symbols, half-faded glyphs of the old royal tomb, lined the walls. He traced them with trembling fingers. The oath fire was kindled here, he murmured. He remembered the ceremony now. The queen had chosen him, not the other way around. Her hand had touched his chest, and the flame had bound him. His throat tightened. That day had been his highest honor. She left a piece of herself here, Sarah whispered, crouching near a stone basin. The water within shimmered with unnatural stillness. This place remembers her. Rhys stared into the basin. The surface rippled. For a heartbeat, her face, younger, smiling, real, gazed back. His knees buckled. She had been here. And more than that, some part of her still lingered. But magic this strong didn't remain undisturbed. They came at dusk, twisted things with stolen faces. Hollowed bodies that moved in jerks and gasps, mouths twitching without words. Sarah fired her crossbow once, twice, before they swarmed. Rhys met them with steel. His sword cleaved through memories made flesh, each strike releasing a puff of silver mist. They weren't truly alive, nor truly dead. They were echoes, malformed by the queen's attempt to forget herself. And now, drawn to Rhys's burning sense of loyalty, they sought to unmake him too. He fought like a man possessed, his mind latching to every remaining piece of himself. The queen's face, the scent of her hair, the feel of her hand on his shoulder. Sarah screamed as one of the creatures seized her arm, but Rhys reached her just in time. Together, they shattered the last echo. The temple fell silent. But something had changed. Rhys could feel it in the marrow of the stone. The hollow was awakening to his search. Later, they sat in silence, nursing wounds and staring at the dying fire. Rhys stared into the flames, trying to grasp the edge of another memory, something just beyond reach. Do you ever wonder, he said quietly, why it was her face I remembered? Sarah shrugged. Some memories burn hotter. Maybe you loved her. Rhys shook his head. Not love. Duty. Devotion. A promise made before the gods. She looked at him, eyes unreadable. Devotion like that, it's rare now. Maybe it's what the hollow can't eat. Rhys didn't answer. The fire cracked. The forest rustled with breathless anticipation. He knew, now, that the queen had not been taken. She had fled. But why? And where? And how had her magic gone so terribly wrong? They departed at dawn, moving north toward the old trade road. Sarah rode a mule she'd stolen from a hollow village, and Rhys walked beside her, always alert. The wind whispered nonsense through the trees, fragments of old nursery rhymes, lost vows, half-spoken names. It was as though the land itself was trying to remember something. And perhaps it was. Magic, after all, was memory distilled. And the hollow? It was forgetting weaponized. Rhys began to suspect that the Queen's spell hadn't simply erased names. It had rewritten the very threads of reality. "You still think she wants to be found?" Sarah asked as they made camp that night. Rhys didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, "I don't know. But I think some part of her still remembers who she was. And that part is calling to me." That night he dreamed. Not the empty fog that had haunted his sleep since the hollow took hold, but a true dream. He stood in the royal garden, beneath the moonlit arbor, and the Queen waited there, barefoot on the dew-kissed grass. Her eyes shimmered with sorrow. "Rhys," she said, and his name echoed like a bell in his chest. "You shouldn't have followed me. You left," he said, voice choked. "I failed you." She reached for him. "No. You were the only one who saw me. Truly saw me." Her fingers brushed his cheek. "I didn't mean to break the world." When he awoke, his face was wet with tears, and his name, his true name, was whole again. The dream had left something behind. A direction. A purpose. Rhys rose before dawn, drawing a map in the dirt. "She's heading east," he told Sarah. "Toward the Mistfen." The girl paled. "That place is cursed. Nothing remembers itself in the Mistfen. People walk in and forget their names before noon." Rhys nodded. "Then we must hurry. If she forgets herself completely..." He couldn't finish the thought. Sarah gritted her teeth. "You're mad, Knight. But I'll follow you. If only to see what kind of queen breaks her kingdom to save herself." Rhys didn't argue. He only tightened the straps on his pack and walked eastward. Behind them, the ruins of the temple groaned as wind swept through the broken stones. The glyphs faded a little more. In the sky above, clouds moved like shifting memory. And deep in the hollow's core, something stirred, a ripple in the forgetfulness. A disturbance in the magic. For the first time in a year, a hollowed woman sitting by a river looked up and frowned. A name tickled the edge of her mind. She could almost remember the color gold. A prince's voice. A crown of woven stars. Then it was gone. But something had changed. Something had begun to return. Mistfen was not a forest, though it wore trees like a half-forgotten memory. It was not a swamp, though its roots drank deep from sunless waters. It was a boundary, a veil between remembrance and oblivion. Few dared to cross it, and none returned the same. Rhys and Sarah stood at its threshold beneath the sky drained of color, where the air thickened and grew heavy with forgotten songs. The mist rose like breath from a dying god, swallowing the trunks and leaves and light. "If we lose each other in there," Sarah said, binding a red ribbon around her wrist. "Follow this." Rhys tied a matching strip to his belt. It felt like a child's game against the gravity of what lay ahead. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, the mist closing over him like water, Sarah close behind. The first thing he lost was the sky. The second was the ground. The third was time. They wandered for hours, or perhaps minutes. It was impossible to tell. The mist deadened sound, blurred vision, and weighed on their thoughts like sleep. Rhys kept his hand on the hilt of his sword and his eyes on the ribbon flaring red against the monochrome fog. Whispers echoed all around them. Not voices, but fragments, laughter, weeping, oaths spoken long ago. Sarah murmured to herself, chanting her own name like a warding spell. "Sarah of Hollow Bridge," she repeated. "Daughter of Joran. Sister of Mila. Remember me." Rhys gritted his teeth and focused. The Queen's face. Her voice. Her touch. These were his anchors. But the hollow did not allow devotion to go untested. Soon, the mist took on shapes. He saw his father, stern, proud, disappointed. He saw fellow guards, eyes hollow, reaching toward him. He saw the Queen, but distorted, accusing. "You failed me," her image hissed. Rhys shut his eyes and walked forward. "No," he whispered. "I still remember." They found a structure in the mist, a stone gate, half buried in peat and crowned in ivy. Older than the kingdom itself. Its archway pulsed with weak magic, flickering like a candle guttering in wind. "An old border shrine," Sarah said. People used to leave offerings here to remember the dead. She placed a coin on the altar, though it bore no face anymore. Rhys knelt beside her. He didn't pray, but something within him stirred. The oath fire, though long dimmed, flickered again. In the stillness, a shape appeared behind the gate, a tall figure in royal garb, veiled in gold and shadow. Rhys's heart surged. My queen? But as he stepped forward, the image fractured, becoming a hollow thing with too many eyes and a mouth that dripped silence. It lunged. Rhys drew steel and struck. The blade met resistance not of flesh but of memory. The monster shrieked as the sword passed through its form, slicing a thread of forgetfulness. Sarah's bolt followed, striking its center. It dissolved in mist, but left behind something solid, a scrap of cloth, embroidered with the queen's sigil. Real. Untouched. That scrap led them deeper. The trees grew stranger, bent in unnatural arcs, their bark bearing impressions of faces, as if the forest had once remembered every soul to pass beneath its branches. The fog grew thinner for a time, and a stream appeared, a narrow ribbon of black water, running straight as an arrow. The memory thread, Sarah said. It said it leads to the source. They followed the stream, silent, the air tight with unseen tension. Rhys felt watched. Not by beasts or men, but by the hollow itself, an intelligence diffused across the land, curious and hungry. As they walked, Rhys noticed Sarah's steps falter. Her eyes dimmed. My sister's name, she murmured. What was it? Rhys caught her arm. Myla. You said Myla? She blinked hard, the fog receding from her gaze. Right. Myla. Don't let me lose that. He squeezed her shoulder. I won't. But he feared what else the hollow might steal before they reached its heart. The stream ended in a mirror lake, its surface still as glass, reflecting stars that didn't exist. In its center stood a tower, crooked, vine-covered, and impossibly silent. No birds, no insects, not even wind. Just the hush of forgotten things. A small boat waited at the shore, untouched by rot. Rhys and Sarah exchanged a glance, then stepped in. The boat moved on its own, gliding across the water as if guided by thought. Halfway across, Rhys looked down. The reflection below didn't show himself, it showed the queen. Her face gaunt, her eyes wide with terror. Then it shifted to her smiling. Then crying. Then screaming. It's trying to shake us, he said. Don't look. But Sarah's gaze had fixed on something deep below, her mouth trembling. I see my mother, she whispered. She's in the water. Rhys gripped her hand. That's not her. It's your grief pretending to be her. The boat rocked violently, the water beginning to churn. Hold fast, Rhys shouted. They shut their eyes and clung to each other until the storm of memory passed. They reached the tower at nightfall, if it could be called that in a land without sky. The entrance was sealed by a sigil of woven runes, ancient, tangled, and alive. Rhys touched it. Pain lanced through his palm, but also recognition. He knew this mark. It was the Queen's seal, yes, but twisted, rewritten by desperation. This was where she had cast the spell. This was the source. The oath fire in his blood flared. The door opened with a hiss of old magic, revealing stairs spiraling downward instead of up. She went below, Rhys said. Sarah hesitated. And became what? Rhys didn't answer. They descended together, torches in hand. Each step echoed with the weight of unspoken truths. As they neared the bottom, the air changed, thicker, hotter, infused with a pulse like a heartbeat. At the end of the descent, they found a hall of mirrors. Not glass, but polished obsidian, each reflecting a different version of themselves. In one, Rhys saw himself with a crown. In another, dead. In another, hollow. He looked away. At the center of the chamber stood a throne of ashwood, surrounded by a ring of runes carved into the stone. Upon it sat a woman in plain peasant's dress, her hair braided with twigs and frost. Her hands rested on her lap, still as carved marble. She was not hollow. Not entirely. Her eyes moved, tracking their approach, but her face held no recognition. Rhys's breath caught. "My queen." She didn't respond. He fell to one knee. "Ilianwen of Ashvale. I am Rhys Tarnell. You chose me." No flicker. No spark. Only silence. Then she spoke softly, like leaves falling on snow. "That name hurts." Rhys rose. "You created the hollow. To erase yourself." Her eyes turned to the mirrors. "To stop the marriage. To stop the war. I had no choice." Sarah's eyes widened. "You did this for peace?" The queen blinked slowly. "I only meant to forget myself. But the spell, it grew. Memory feeds memory. Now I am the center of forgetting." Rhys stepped forward. "Then we remember for you." He reached into his satchel and pulled out the embroidered scrap from the shrine. Then, a lock of her hair he'd once found in the folds of a royal letter. A coin with her image. He laid them before her, trembling. "Each of these is a thread. Together they weave you." The queen stared. Something inside her trembled. "They're just things." "No," Rhys said, voice firm. "They're anchors. You are Ilianwen. You chose peace. You loved your people." Her brow furrowed. A crack formed in her voice. I danced in the spring festival." "Yes," Rhys said, stepping closer. "You sang with the orphan girls in the Rose Chapel. You named my sister after a starlit poem." Her hands trembled. "You remember me?" Rhys knelt again. "With all that I am." The queen wept. Not loudly. Not bitterly. But freely. It was the first true thing in this tower since the hollow had begun. The runes glowed softly. Something was changing. But the hollow would not release its heart so easily. The mirrors shattered. Darkness rushed inward, taking form, an echo of the queen, twisted and monstrous, shaped from every lost name, every broken vow. "Leave her," it hissed. "She chose to forget. She wanted peace in oblivion." Rhys stood before it. "She didn't want this." The echoes surged. Rhys met it with his blade. The oath fire burned in every swing, fueled not by duty alone, but by memory, his loyalty, his pain, his hope. Sarah loosed arrows into the storm. The queen stood still, as if caught between waking and dream. "Ilianwen," Rhys cried. "You are not the hollow!" Her voice broke through at last. "No. I am remembered." Light burst from her chest, not magic, but memory reclaimed. The shadow screamed and fractured. The mirrors exploded in brilliance. The chamber shook. And the hollow screamed. When the silence returned, the queen collapsed. Rhys caught her, cradling her against his chest. Her eyes fluttered. "I remember," she whispered. "I remember everything. The spell, it's breaking. Not just here," Sarah said, pointing to the ceiling. "Everywhere." Rhys looked up. The mist was thinning. For the first time, stars pierced the fog. Real stars. "We have to get her out," Rhys said. "The hollow's losing control. If it collapses..." They carried her up the stairs, through a tower now trembling with the weight of its own undoing. Outside, the lake boiled. The boat was gone. But the memory-threaded stream now ran bright gold. Rhys stepped into it, holding Ilianwen. "This stream remembers her," he said. "It will carry us out." The current was swift, but the water did not pull, it guided. They drifted through half-lit mist as stars blinked overhead. Along the banks, hollowed figures paused. Looked up. Eyes flickered. One spoke. Then another. Then another. Names. Names returned like sparks in a storm. The hollow was unraveling. Not vanishing, but becoming whole. Rhys wept openly, the queen's hand tight in his. She murmured more memories with each breath, faint, fractured but real. "We're almost home," he told her. "Ashvale still stands. We can save it." They emerged at dawn on the edge of a forest not marked on any map. Behind them, the mist coiled one final time, then vanished like a sigh. Rhys stood, lifting Ilianwen in his arms, Sarah looked out across the golden horizon, where birds now sang and trees bore names again. "You did it," she said softly. Rhys shook his head. "We remembered it." In the distance, bells rang from the towers of Ashvale. Not alarms, but chimes. Someone had remembered how to ring them. Rhys turned toward the sound, carrying his queen, and began the final journey home. Ashvale had not heard bells in months. Not since the last memory keeper vanished beneath the hollow's touch. Yet as Rhys, Sarah, and the queen stepped through the old forest's edge, the air shimmered with sound. Not sharp tolls of alarm or mourning, but clear chimes, tones of welcome. The nearer they came to the outer gates, the more alive the land felt. Moss peeled from ancient statues, vines drew back from paths, and birds, long silent, sang once more. The hollow still lingered in the eyes of many, but its grip had loosened. People stirred in doorways, confused but present. A child cried, not with fear, but recognition. "Mama!" and threw herself into her mother's arms. Sarah gasped, eyes wide, watching memory return like spring floodwaters. The queen stirred in Rhys's arms, blinking slowly. "This place," she murmured. "It knows me." Rhys nodded. "It remembers you, and now you must remember it." The city gates were guarded again. A pair of young men in tattered armor stood unsure as the trio approached. They raised spears half-heartedly, recognition dawning in their eyes. "Sir Rhys?" one asked. The name tasted foreign on his tongue, as though unearthed from beneath a century of dust. "Is it really you?" Rhys set the queen gently down, steadying her. "It is. The queen has returned. She remembers." The second guard fell to one knee, tears welling. "I thought she was a dream. A story to comfort children." The queen smiled faintly, as if the gesture was still unfamiliar. "I was a story," she said. "Now I must become truth again." The gates groaned open. Inside, Ashvale breathed. Market stalls reopened. Windows filled with candlelight. A baker stared at his own hands, whispered his daughter's name, and sobbed. A cobbler knelt by a cracked pair of boots and laughed. Sarah leaned close to Rhys. "It's like watching a heart relearn its own beat." Rhys nodded. "But the wound beneath still festers." They were taken to the citadel, once a beacon of Ashvale's glory, now a ruin draped in ivy and silence. The throne room echoed with absence. No courtiers, no guards, just dust and old sunlight. The queen looked up at her own banner, frayed and fading. "This is where it began," she whispered. "Where I stood and lied." Rhys took her hand. "You tried to save us all." Her eyes narrowed. "By stealing myself? By damning the kingdom to forget itself?" Sarah stepped forward. "You made a terrible choice, but now you have another. What you do next will matter more." The queen nodded slowly. "Then I will not run again." Her voice rang out through the chamber, not with magic, but with presence. "Bring the scribes. The remaining oath keepers. Anyone who remembers how to write. We must restore the names." Rhys watched as the light through the stained glass brightened. The hollow had not won. Not yet. Words spread quickly. Those who retained pieces of memory began gathering in the lower halls. Elder scribes, apprentices, bards, all converged to rebuild the archive of names, a great hall once used to record every citizen's name and story. Many of the books were blank, their ink drained by the hollow. But the act of trying to remember summoned magic of its own. When Rhys wrote his name, Rhys Tarnell, Crown Guard of Ashvale, the ink glowed faintly, anchoring him further. Sarah's full name returned in waves, drawn by her own will and whispered stories. The queen, however, hesitated before the page. Her hand hovered over the parchment, fingers trembling. "Ilian went," she whispered. "But not the one who ruled." Rhys stepped beside her. "Then write the one who remembers." She did. Her name shimmered, and the book exhaled warm light. The scribes gasped. A page had returned to life. Others followed, like vines regrowing in sunlight. But the hollow was not vanquished. It had no single form now, no tower or face, but it lingered in dark places, where grief and regret still festered. One evening, a girl was found wandering the edge of the Grand Market, murmuring the name of her dead brother. Her eyes were dim. A whisper coiled around her tongue. Better to forget. Rhys arrived first, pressing a hand to her brow. No, he said softly. You are called Mira. You are his sister. The girl gasped as if dragged from drowning. Her eyes cleared. You knew him? I knew his swordsmanship. He trained near the gardens. He was brave. The child wept, and in doing so was saved. But these incidents grew more frequent. The Hollow, though weakened, fought to remain. It had learned to feed on guilt, on memory twisted against itself. A new kind of plague, subtler, more cunning, was taking root. The Queen called a council of all who still remembered leadership. There were few: an exiled magistrate, a weathered knight captain, a midwife from the eastern wards. Together they formed the Circle of Recall, dedicated to protecting memory and defending against the Hollow's return. Their symbol was a broken mirror, mended with gold, because memory, once cracked, can still shine. Sarah, to her own surprise, was named Seeker of Threads, tasked with tracing lost names and recovering them before they vanished. Rhys was offered his old post as captain of the Crown Guard, but he declined. I must remain mobile, he said. The Hollow is shifting. It will not face us head-on again. Instead, he became the Queen's shadow once more, an old title, now reborn. Not just protector, but witness. His role was to remember the Queen even if all else was forgotten again. Ilianwen accepted this solemnly. Then let my shadow always stand beside the truth. Though the days lengthened and song returned to the markets, Rhys felt unrest coiling in the alleys and cellars. Rumors spread of a masked figure who whispered promises to the grieving. Forget your pain, he said. Leave your name behind, and be free. These whispers led people to disappear, first a baker, then a blacksmith, then a court minstrel. Each time, no body was found. Only a single word remained, scrawled in ash on walls or windows: release. Rhys and Sarah followed these trails, but the masked figure moved with uncanny foresight, always a step ahead. At last, one desperate survivor told them, he wears no face. He's made of what we wish we didn't feel. That night, Rhys dreamed of the Hollow again, not as fog or tower, but as a man wearing every sorrow Rhys had buried. It smiled with his brother's face. Rhys woke trembling. The Hollow had evolved. The Queen sensed it too. In her chambers, she began recording her memories aloud, voice captured in spell crystals. In case I forget again, she said. Rhys stood watch, listening to stories he'd never heard. How her mother died of silent grief, how her first love had vanished into war, how each pressure of the crown hollowed her from within long before any spell was cast. These confessions were heavy, painful, but necessary. To remember, Ilianwen said, is to be brave enough to feel again. Rhys offered his own memory, of his brother Daelen, who had vanished during the first year of the Hollow. He was stronger than me, Rhys said, but not strong enough to forget his guilt. His voice cracked. I should have saved him. The Queen reached across the table, touching his hand. You can. By remembering him fully. And so he did. He spoke Dalen's name into the crystal, and for the first time in a year, he no longer felt hollow. One morning, Sarah returned from a mission with a grim expression. The masked figure has a name, she said, and it's one we all feared lost. She unrolled a parchment. On it, drawn in rough ink, was a familiar face. Dalen Tarnell, she whispered. Rhys staggered back. No, yes, Sarah replied. He was the first to surrender his name willingly. Now he offers that oblivion to others. Rhys clenched his fists. He didn't die. He chose the Hollow. The Queen looked grave. Then he is its voice now. The temptation within the silence. Rhys said nothing, but his eyes burned. The Hollow had taken many, but this felt personal, surgical. It had not only wounded him, it had turned his memory into a weapon. Then I will face him, he said. And if he is gone beyond saving, No, the Queen interrupted. Not gone. Only buried. You must dig through sorrow to bring him back. Their next journey began at twilight. The circle had traced the hollow's resurgence to a forgotten village at the edge of the sea, Caer Lorhen, once a fishing haven, now empty. Rhys, Sarah, and a few chosen oath keepers departed under cover of fog. As they approached, they saw fires burning, controlled, quiet, ceremonial. Hollowed figures walked in slow circles, chanting words without meaning. In the center stood Daelen unmasked. His face bore no malice, only calm. Brother, he said, as if no time had passed. Rhys stepped forward. You're leading them into oblivion. Daelen smiled. I'm setting them free. No pain, no weight. Just release. That isn't freedom, Rhys growled. It's erasure. Isn't that what she wanted? Daelen asked, nodding toward Ilianwen's sigil on Rhys's armor. To forget who she was? Rhys lifted his blade, but it trembled in his hand. His brother had not forgotten. He had chosen. The confrontation did not end in steel. Daelen raised no weapon. Instead, he offered Rhys a seat at his fire. Remember too much and it crushes you, he said. You carry the pain of an entire kingdom. Rhys sat. Not in surrender, but in challenge. I carry it because someone must. Memory is not a burden, it's the soil from which healing grows. Daelen looked away, eyes distant. I tried to remember once. It broke me. Rhys reached into his pack and handed him the crystal. His voice recorded. Daelen Tarnell, my brother. Brave. Stubborn. Kind. Dalen's hand trembled as he accepted it. You kept me? I never let you go. For a long moment, silence. Then, slowly, tears welled in Dalen's eyes. The hollow around them shuddered. The chant of the hollowed broke. Someone sobbed. Someone sang. Daelen did not return with them. Not yet. But the spell cracked. His mind flickered, unsteady, but open. The hollow's grip on Caer Lorhen lifted like mist at dawn. Rhys returned to Ashvale changed, not hardened, but opened. The Queen met him on the palace steps. You found your brother? I found a piece of him, Rhys answered. More than I hoped for. That night, bells rang again, not in warning, but in welcome. The hollow was not gone, but it had been forced to remember the thing it feared most, hope. Rhys looked up at the starlit sky, and for the first time since the Queen vanished, he smiled. Spring returned to Ashvale not with blossoms, but with memory. Trees long barren unfurled their leaves, each petal a recovered name. Fountains ran again in the royal courtyards, their water carrying echoes of lullabies and ancient laws. Yet beneath the surface of joy, unease brewed. Memory, once freely flowing, now crystallized into something sharp. People argued over which version of the past was true. The hollow had blurred timelines, fractured shared stories. My brother died a knight, one claimed. No, he vanished before the war, said another. Ilianwen listened to each testimony with a weary heart. The plague had stolen facts, but emotion remained. Truth is not a single thread, she said to her council. It is a weave. Tension between strands gives it strength. Rhys stood behind her, ever silent, his eyes watching the growing storm. Sarah returned from the outlands with fresh scrolls, names saved, stories mended, but even she saw the splinters. Memory had been restored. Now, the kingdom must agree what it meant. Tensions grew fastest along the northern border. Villages once erased by the hollow had returned, but with no alignment to Ashvale's laws. Their elders remembered old feuds, old borders. A group calling themselves the Verdun remembered declared independence. The Queen forgot us, their leader cried. Now we forget her. They bore banners not of hollow silence, but of sharpened recollection, axes wrapped in scrolls, swords inked with ancestral names. The Queen sent emissaries, bearing peace and parchment, but one delegation never returned. Rhys was dispatched, with Sarah at his side, to investigate. What they found was not war, but obsession. Every building in the verdant capital was marked in glyphs of memory magic. The people chanted names in unison, refusing to sleep for fear of forgetting again. A child, no older than 7, greeted them by reciting 10 generations of ancestry. "We will not be unmade again," the mayor told Rhys. "Even if it costs us our souls." Rhys understood. The Hollow had made memory sacred, but in doing so, had turned it into a weapon. The Queen summoned a conclave. Delegates from every corner of the kingdom arrived, some by horse, others by sea, still others walking from towns newly emerged from the Hollow's grip. The citadel buzzed with voices, arguments, contradictions. The circle of recall stood at its center, trying to mediate. Rhys watched from the shadows, his gaze ever on the Queen, who sat beneath the banner of Ashvale, her expression unreadable. "We are not here to rebuild what was," she said, rising. "We are here to remember forward. Let the past guide us, not bind us." Her words were met with silence. Then murmurs. Then applause. But not all were convinced. A masked figure among the delegates slipped away before the session ended. Sarah followed, tracing him to a forgotten chamber beneath the palace. There she found a circle of candles, a map marked with blood, and a sigil she had not seen since Miss Finn. She returned to Rhys pale and trembling. "The Hollow isn't dying," she said. "It's organizing." In the nights that followed, memory crystals began vanishing from the royal archives. These spellbound stones held voices, stories, truths, relics of reclaimed identity. Then came the dreams. Rhys began waking with half-formed thoughts not his own. He dreamed of a city beneath the earth, where the Hollow whispered in forgotten tongues. The Queen, too, was restless. Her hands shook when she held a quill. "They're speaking to me," she said. "Not in words, but in ache." The circle of recall convened an emergency session. "A second hollowing is being born," the oldest archivist warned. "Not of forgetfulness, but of conflicting memory. This hollow did not erase, it corrupted. Turned recollection into poison. Names into daggers. A war of remembrance," the Queen whispered. Rhys gritted his teeth. "Then we must learn to fight with memory, not just for it." Sarah proposed a dangerous plan. "We find the source of this new hollow. Cut it at the root." She laid a map on the council table, hand-drawn, uncertain. "In my travels, I heard tales of a city beneath the earth. It existed before Ashvale. Before names were carved in stone. It was called Naltir, the city of first thought." The Queen paled. "It's a myth." Sarah shook her head. "No. It's buried." Rhys leaned over the map. "And this is where the hollow is growing?" "Not just growing," she said. "Feeding." The Queen agreed. A small party would go. Rhys, Sarah, 2 oath keepers, and a reluctant historian named Lior who specialized in pre-Ashvale civilizations. They would descend into the dark, not just to find the source, but to understand it. For if memory was turning hostile, they needed to know what it feared most. They departed under the cloak of a moonless night, traveling west into the singing canyons, where echoes moved faster than wind. The path was treacherous, rocks slick with moss, winds sharp as razors. Lior spoke little, muttering dates and linguistics under his breath. At last, after 3 days of descent, they found the door. A stone arch, half buried, etched with the same sigils Rhys had seen beneath the palace. He placed a hand against it. "Warm. Alive. It remembers us," Lior whispered. "Or it remembers what we were." The door opened not with sound, but with silence. Inside was darkness thick enough to weigh on the lungs. They lit no torches. The walls themselves glowed faintly with memory light, casting their own faces back at them. Each step downward felt like walking into thought. Naltir was not dead. It breathed. It pulsed. Its streets were carved from obsidian glass, polished smooth by the passage of ancient ideas. Statues lined the corridors, not of kings or gods, but of emotions. Grief. Joy. Longing. Each figure bore no face, only posture. In the central plaza, A great tree grew upside down from the ceiling, its roots dangling above a lake of ink. There, beneath its branches, sat a man in robes of shadow. Dalen. Rhys's heart clenched. His brother looked up, smiling faintly. You followed me to the beginning. Rhys stepped forward. To the root. Dalen's eyes shimmered. This place was never meant for people. It was meant for memory itself. And now it has woken. Sarah raised her bow. Are you its prophet? Dalen chuckled. I am its echo. From the lake, ripples formed. And from those ripples, figures rose, memories shaped into warriors, carrying the voices of the past as weapons. Battle erupted, not of blades but of remembrance. The memory figures cried out names with such force they cracked stone. One Oath Keeper screamed and collapsed, clutching her ears. Another was struck by a spear made of sorrow and vanished, not dead, but forgotten. Rhys fought with Oath Fire, its light cleaving through the false past like a sword of truth. Sarah fired arrows tipped with names she had recovered, each strike anchoring reality. Leor, surprisingly, held firm, chanting ancient phrases that bent memory into shields. But Dalen remained still, untouched, watching. You cannot kill it, he said. You are it. The hollow was born the moment you chose to remember pain instead of letting it go. Rhys shouted above the chaos. Then pain must be remembered and healed, not buried. The Queen's voice echoed from behind them. And I will be the first to bleed. She stepped into the fray, her crown burning with spell fire. The Queen's arrival turned the tide. Her memories spilled from her in torrents, childhood laughter, midnight fears, the sound of a kingdom crumbling. Each memory, spoken aloud, became light. The hollow figures recoiled. But then the lake surged. From it rose a final figure, tall, eyeless, mouthless, cloaked in every forgotten name. It moved like inevitability. Leor gasped. That is the first forgetting. The first time anyone chose to turn away from truth. It raised a hand, and Rhys saw his own image reflected in its palm, young, terrified, burying his grief after Dalen vanished. The figure reached for him. Rhys hesitated, then drew his blade, not in anger, but in recognition. Yes. I was afraid. I wanted to forget. But I didn't. He plunged the blade into the figure's chest, not to kill, but to remind. The creature screamed, not in pain, but in understanding, and unraveled into dust. Silence returned. True silence. No menace. No weight. Just breath. Dalen knelt by the lake, eyes wet. You could have let it win, he said. Rhys helped him up. So could you. Sarah leaned against a pillar, spent. Did we win? Leor stared into the ink. There is no winning. Only choosing to face memory as it is. The Queen turned to the lake, and whispered her name once more. The tree above them bloomed with golden leaves. One fell into her hand. This place is not evil, she said. It's a mirror. The hollow didn't create it. We did, when we forgot that truth is not perfect. They climbed back up through tunnels now lined with faint light. Now tear did not vanish, but it no longer pulsed with hunger. It waited. A library of sorrow, now understood. Ashvale received them not with parades, but with stillness. Word of their journey had spread. Those who had doubted now waited in silent circles, clutching names like relics. The Queen stood on the citadel steps, crown in hand. I do not ask you to forget, she said, nor to forgive all. But let us share our memories, even the broken ones. Only then will the hollow fade. Across the kingdom, people began writing, not laws or songs, but their truths. Stories of fear, of love, of mistakes, of survival. These writings became the Great Weave, a tapestry of Ashvale's rebirth. Rhys stitched his own thread into it. I failed once. I remembered. I returned. And beneath it, Ilionwen stitched. And so did I. Night fell. A quiet night. No dreams. No hollow. Just wind through trees that remembered spring. Rhys stood on the palace balcony, watching the stars. Sarah joined him, humming an old song she'd once thought forgotten. "Do you think we're safe now?" she asked. Rhys shook his head. "I think we're honest now. That's stronger." Below, the queen walked among her people, not as ruler, but as one who had fallen and risen. Her steps left no magic. Only footprints. Rhys watched her go, the last shadow of a broken kingdom. And in that moment, he felt peace, not because the war was over, but because the silence no longer frightened him. The tunnels beneath the ruined city of Caer Thorn whispered like the breath of the dead. Cold stone wept with moisture, and the ceiling hung low, carved by hands long forgotten. Rhys pressed his palm to the wall, feeling the tremble of ancient enchantments still alive in the rock. He had come far since leaving Ashvale's shattered court, guided only by the ghost of a face he could no longer name. Beside him, a lantern flickered in Sarah's hand, their only true light since entering the Undercity. The hollow had not touched this place, but something older slumbered here, deeper than memory and more brittle than bone. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Rhys nodded. The noise wasn't footsteps or echoes, it was breath. Deep and rhythmic. As if the city itself dreamed. "We're close," Rhys murmured. "To what?" she asked. His hand went to the hilt of his sword. "To the reason they buried a crown down here." The descent grew more treacherous. The stonework shifted from hewn masonry to rough caverns, dripping with stalactites like the fangs of some earthbound beast. Rhys took point, sword drawn, senses attuned to the shift in magic. It wasn't the hollow. It was older, wild and rooted in the bones of the land. Each step sent ripples through his fractured mind, stirring glimpses of a golden crown falling into fire, a pale hand reaching out, lips forming a name he could not remember. Behind him, Sarah muttered a quiet prayer in the language of the Ember Witches. Her breath fogged the air in the growing cold. Then the floor opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost to darkness, and in the center stood a black stone throne, draped in cobwebs and crowned with a circlet of ivy. Rhys halted. "This isn't just a tomb," he said. "It's a vault of memory." And something in the dark stirred at his voice. They approached the throne, every step echoing like thunder. The air was heavy with sorrow, the kind that stains bloodlines. Symbols carved in ancient Ashvalian script shimmered faintly, spells of containment and remembrance intertwined. "What is this place?" Sarah breathed. Rhys knelt before the throne and ran a hand over the script. The memories surged again, this time more vivid, a coronation, the roar of a crowd, the queen's eyes brimming with defiance, and his own voice pledging loyalty as her shadow. "It's where the first king locked away the curse of forgetting," he said, trembling. "He feared the hollow long before it was born." Sarah stepped beside him, eyes wide. "And now it's waking." The throne pulsed faintly. From its base, a hidden compartment hissed open, revealing a scroll wrapped in silk. Rhys took it, and at his touch, it unraveled itself like a living thing, revealing not words, but memories. His own. He was 12 again, hidden behind the palace curtains, spying on the royal tutors. The queen, no, the girl who would become queen, was younger than him, but fiercer, cleverer. She caught him and smiled instead of scolding. That was their first meeting. Rhys staggered back as the vision flooded him, tears stinging his eyes. "I remember her name," he whispered. "Lyanna." The chamber trembled. The throne flared with pale light. The scroll burned to ash in his hands, its duty fulfilled. "What just happened?" Sarah asked. "You triggered the seal." A voice boomed from the dark. A figure emerged, tall, robed in crimson shadow, face obscured. "And now the crownless king knows you are here." Rhys rose, blade drawn, heart pounding. "Who are you?" The figure lowered its hood. A hollow. But not like the others. Its eyes flickered, fragments of memory clinging to a shattered soul. "I am what remains of the last king's regret." The creature's voice echoed with grief and wisdom. "He tried to erase the pain of the war, of betrayal, of love lost. He forged the vault to bury memory itself. But memory is stubborn. It seeps through blood and stone." Rhys lowered his blade. "Why show me this now?" The Hollow King's fragment stepped toward the throne. Because your bond with the Queen was forged in truth. It's stronger than the curse. You are a key. Sarah stepped between them. You're saying he can fix this? No, the Hollow said. He can remember, and through that, awaken her. Rhys's throat tightened. But I've lost everything. How can I bring her back when I barely know who I am? The Hollow King's eyes gleamed. You remember her name. That is more than most. Then it turned, and as it did, the chamber wall behind the throne melted away into a glowing corridor of light and shadow. Your next path lies through the Garden of the Unnamed. Go. The corridor felt like walking through someone else's dream. Images danced along the walls, scenes from lives Rhys didn't know if he had lived or imagined. A girl laughing in a library, a sword falling into a river, a palace burning under a purple sky. Sarah gripped his hand tightly, her fingers warm and real. If this is memory, she whispered, then the Hollow is what happens when memory dies. At the corridor's end, they emerged into sunlight so sudden it blinded them. Grass swayed beneath their feet, and ahead stretched a vast garden overrun by wild blooms. Flowers that shimmered and shifted color like flame. Stone statues lined the paths, each bearing no face, each nameplate worn smooth. Rhys's breath caught. These are the Hallowed, he murmured. Before the plague reached them. Sarah knelt beside one statue and touched its chest. It pulsed faintly, still alive beneath the stone. They're not dead. Just waiting. The garden was a silent wail, an echo chamber of stolen identity. Each statue bore no name, yet Rhys felt an overwhelming ache standing among them, as though their forgotten lives pressed against his skin. They followed the winding path toward the heart of the garden, where an obsidian spire rose, crowned by thorn vines. Beneath it stood a woman in white, veiled and barefoot, her hands folded. She turned as they approached. Her face was blank, hollow. Yet Rhys's heart thundered. Lyanna, he whispered. Sarah grabbed his arm. She doesn't know who she is. Be careful. He stepped closer. The woman tilted her head, studying him with impassive curiosity. Do you seek someone? She asked. Her voice was soft, musical, but void of self. Yes, Rhys said, voice cracking. I seek the Queen of Ashvale. She smiled faintly. Then I cannot help you. I am no one. But her hands trembled. Rhys knelt before her. I swore to protect you, he said, tears flowing freely. Even when you forgot yourself, I remembered. He reached into his cloak and withdrew a small brooch, a silver falcon with ruby eyes. You gave me this the night the war ended. Do you remember why? She touched the brooch, her fingers lingering. Her breath caught a single hitch. A falcon flies free, she murmured. Rhys nodded. You said it would remind me that even shadows can soar. Her knees buckled, and he caught her. For a heartbeat, her eyes filled with recognition, then faded. You must go, she whispered. It's not safe. He watches. Rhys frowned. Who? A shadow fell over the garden. The sky darkened. Statues cracked. Sarah raised her staff. Something's coming. The queen fell to her knees, clutching her head. He comes to unmake what you restore. Rhys drew his blade. Then let him come. The storm arrived as a whirlwind of black petals and shrieking wind. From it stepped a figure clad in robes of shifting dusk, a crown of bone upon his head. His face was ever-changing, flickering between 1,000 features, each one a stolen identity. You meddle in what must be forgotten, he hissed. Rhys stood between him and the queen. You are the Hollow's will. I am oblivion, the being said. Born of fear, fed by guilt, shaped by your queen's desire to vanish. He raised a hand and the statues began to shatter. The garden screamed. Sarah loosed fire from her palms, but it passed through him like mist. Rhys charged. His blade met the creature's form, and tore through nothing. Oblivion turned amused. You cannot slay a concept, little knight. Rhys fell back, breath ragged. Then I'll outlast it, he growled. The queen looked up, dazed. Rhys. His name on her lips sparked something. He seized it, her voice, fragile but real. Say it again, he begged. She blinked. Rhys. The storm wavered. Oblivion snarled. No. Rhys stepped closer to her, pressing the brooch into her palm. You chose to forget to save Ashvale. But you are still Lyanna. You still have power. She stared at the brooch, and slowly, light began to seep from her skin. Memory surged back, ripples that cracked the air. The statue stopped crumbling. Sarah screamed as the magic exploded outward, a wave of identity and name and truth. Oblivion shrieked as the wave struck him. No! You are mine! But Lyanna stood, rising like a flame reborn. I was never yours, she said. With a final cry, she hurled her memory into him, and oblivion shattered like glass, fragments spinning into mist. The garden stilled, and the statues began to weep. They collapsed together beneath the spire, Lyanna sobbing against Rhys's shoulder. I didn't mean for it to spread, she whispered. I just wanted to be free. Rhys held her tightly. You were trying to save the kingdom. You did. Around them, the statues cracked open, real people emerging, dazed but alive. Faces looked to the sun, blinking, crying. One by one, names were spoken again. A great bell rang in the distance, one Rhys had not heard since the day the queen vanished. Sarah smiled through tears. The hollow is breaking. But Lyanna shook her head. Not yet. Oblivion is wounded, not gone. He will retreat deeper, into Ashvale's heart. Rhys rose. Then we finish it. She looked at him, afraid. To stop it fully. I must remember everything. Even the truth I ran from. Rhys met her gaze. I'll carry it with you. The dawn lit the path north. Behind them, the garden bloomed anew, color and life restored. Ahead, the ruins of Ashvale's inner sanctum loomed, where oblivion now writhed in the shadows of forgotten kings. Lyanna, once a hollow, now walked with crownless dignity, her hand in Rhys's. Sarah led the way, flames flickering in her staff. The journey would grow harder. Memory was healing, but pain followed. They had rekindled identity, but must now confront its cost. Rhys looked back once, at the place where his queen had spoken his name, and whispered it to himself. Rhys. It no longer felt like a stranger's. It was his. The hollow had cracked. But for Ashvale to be whole again, they would have to walk through its final shadow, and destroy what the first king had buried, the seed of forgetting that still beat beneath the throne. The Wormfen was no place for memory. Rhys realized this as he stepped beneath the dripping canopy of bone-pale trees, their roots winding like veins across the muck. The air stank of rot and sorrow, each breath a claw dragging through the lungs. The marshes had once been a borderland between Ashvale and the lost province of Dareth, but now no flags flew here, no carts rolled, no names were spoken. Only the hollow walked these bogs, those who wandered too far from their hearts and left their identities behind. They called it the Grave of Echoes. Yet Rhys knew he had to press forward, because somewhere in this fetid expanse lay the lair of the Memory Eater, a beast not born of flesh but of regret and twisted sorcery. It hoarded broken paths, drinking down what the hollow left behind. If they could find it, perhaps they could find what had become of the Queen's last choice. And perhaps themselves. The group traveled in silence. Omri the wind scribe kept her head low, her once braided hair now tangled with moss. Jareth, whose blade once gleamed like moonlight, bore it now in a cloth sheath, unwilling to let it taste the air of this cursed place. And Rhys, whose face had become leaner and more lined since Sablemore, marched as though walking into a memory he couldn't refuse. Each step sucked into mud, each insect was a whisper in a language only the hollow could understand. But the worst was when they came upon the remains. Hollowed bodies, still alive, still breathing, crouched by trees or kneeling before the black pools, their eyes white with forgetting. Some reached toward the travelers, not in hunger or hate, but in habit, as if the gesture had once meant something. We should turn back, Jareth said once, after a woman stumbled from the fog and tried to speak. Her mouth moved, but no words formed. Only the sound of wind rustling through autumn leaves escaped. "There's nothing left here but silence and sorrow." But Rhys shook his head. "Then that's where the Queen must be." His voice was hoarse, not from illness but from weight, each syllable dragging the burden of names he could no longer remember. "If the hollow began with her, it ends with her. And the Memory Eater guards the path." They moved again, pressing deeper. The sky dimmed even though it was noon. The trees arched overhead like cathedral ceilings, blotting out light and hope alike. It was Omri who sensed the shift first. "There's an absence here," she whispered. "A place where memory bends, recalls." She pressed her palm against a gnarled trunk, frowning. "Not silence. Starvation." They followed her lead, climbing a ridge of roots and descending into a hollow where no birds sang and no insects dared crawl. There, at the center of a shallow crater, stood a ruin, a stone circle half swallowed by mud, each monolith carved with symbols no one remembered carving. Within its bounds, the wind did not blow. Time paused, unsure of itself. And in the center, a figure crouched. It was neither beast nor man, but both, a patchwork thing wrapped in robes of molted feathers and shreds of forgotten banners. Its head was a shifting blur, faces forming and dissolving like clouds. Rhys stepped forward. The creature raised its head, revealing a flicker of a face he recognized. His old captain. Then it changed, his father. Then a girl from his childhood. Then the Queen. Then no one at all. The Memory Eater did not speak with voice but emotion, a tidal wave crashing into Rhys's soul. It hungered. It did not live to destroy, but to feed, to devour what others left behind. The hollow had made it possible. When memories were severed, they drifted. And this thing, this ancient remnant of failed gods or broken spells, lapped them up like wine. "We seek the Queen," Rhys said. "Not the body. The memory of her choice. Her reason." The creature blinked, 1,000 eyes in one. And it lowered its hand. The world around them shifted. The bog vanished. They stood now in the Queen's chamber, not as it was but as it remembered being. Tapestries unfaded. A hearth burning. The Queen at her mirror, tears streaking her cheeks. Rhys gasped. "This is her, the night she enacted the spell." Omri clutched his arm. "It's not real. It's a memory, devoured and held like prey." But the Queen moved, pacing, speaking aloud to no one, yet everyone. "If I let them wed me to Darien, Ashvale dies. If I flee, they find me. But if I become no one, if I erase myself..." She shuddered. "Perhaps I take the war with me." The spell book on her desk flared open. Glyphs burned like stars. And in that moment, Rhys knew she had meant only herself to be hollowed. But the spell had grown teeth. As the vision collapsed, the Memory Eater spoke, not with sound, but a presence in their minds. "She is still within. But the hollow feeds on intent. Her purpose was self-erasure. To undo that, you must anchor her." Rhys staggered. "Anchor her? How?" The creature's aura dimmed. "Through emotion. Through the last truth that cannot be hollowed." Rhys understood. The loyalty in him, the single surviving piece, the face he remembered even now, it had to be strong enough to replace the forgetting. "Where is she?" he demanded. The Memory Eater turned. A ripple moved through the air. Beyond the circle, in a nearby village built on stilts above the water, a figure swept a porch, humming. A woman with no name, no past. But his queen. The village of Teretha's remnant was a place the maps forgot. Built on the back of decay, its people lived as if the past had no right to them. Fishermen hauled nets with empty eyes. Children played games with no rules. There was no shame, no memory, no grief, only survival. The queen lived among them, known only as Mira. She sold woven reeds and baked flatbread. No one knew she'd once worn a crown. Rhys watched her from a distance for a full day, unsure if he dared approach. Jareth tried to reason with him. "You've come too far to hesitate now." But Rhys was not afraid of her forgetting. He was afraid that if she looked into his eyes and still did not remember, all that remained of him would vanish too. When he finally approached her, the sun was setting. The air smelled of wet reeds and cooking fish. Mira smiled at him politely. "Need something?" she asked. Her voice was gentler than he remembered, but also hollow. "A vessel half full." "Yes," he said, heart pounding. "I need you to remember me." She blinked. "I'm sorry." He took a step closer. "I was your shadow. You made me vow to follow you always, to guard what others could not see." Her brow furrowed. "I don't know who you are." Pain lanced his chest. But he pressed on. "You chose the Hollow to save the kingdom. You thought you had to disappear. But I remember you. I always will. And that memory," he reached out, hand trembling, "it's yours. If you want it." She touched his hand. And the world stopped. Not time, not space, but something deeper, the spinning of souls beneath the skin. Her eyes widened, tears blooming. She saw fragments, her coronation, her brother's execution, the oath Rhys had sworn. Her voice cracked. Rhys. Just that. One name. One memory. But the Hollow screamed. Across the marsh, a wind howled, shaking trees. The plague sensed the breach. It came rushing, a storm of forgetfulness seeking to claim what had been reclaimed. The Memory Eater cried out, its body writhing in agony. It could not consume what was no longer severed. Rhys held the Queen, and she held him back, and between them, a tether formed. Light bloomed, not flame, not sun, but memory made manifest. Omri and Jareth joined them as the sky burned silver. The Hollow surged like black waves, but shattered against the bond forming around the Queen and her shadow. One by one, villagers blinked and gasped, names returning to them. "Amilsa," whispered a child. "Father," muttered an old man, clutching his chest. Throughout the Wormfin, hollowed souls paused, some weeping, some laughing, as memory stitched back into their bones. The Memory Eater let out one final groan and collapsed, fading into nothing. It had fed on forgetting for centuries. Now, with nothing left to consume, it was no more. And above the trees, stars reappeared in constellations long lost to time. Later, as they sat in silence on the Queen's porch, Rhys leaned back against the rail, exhausted but whole. "What happens now?" Jareth asked. The Queen, her memories still fragile but returning, looked toward the rising moon. "Ashvale must choose again. A kingdom rebuilt not on blood or fear, but truth. And I must atone." Omri laid a hand on her shoulder. "You already have." But Rhys said nothing. He stared out over the marsh, watching as it slowly bloomed with life again. He knew the journey wasn't yet over. The Hollow was broken, but its remnants would linger. Still, for the first time, hope was more than a word. It was a memory they all shared. The ruins of Caervareth rose like a mausoleum from the grey plains, its shattered towers clawing the sky as if in accusation. Once the shining heart of Ashvale, it had been the seat of queens and kings for 500 years. Now only bones remained, arched corridors roofless, plazas consumed by creeping ivy, banners long since reduced to ribbons on the wind. Yet as Rhys, Queen Ilaria, Omri, and Jareth approached the gates, something in the air shifted. The sky darkened, not with cloud but with memory. Every stone, every stair hummed with 1,000 echoing voices. "This is where the Hollow began to take root," Ilaria said quietly, eyes distant. "Not in my spell, but in the throne's will. In the blood that fed it." Rhys looked at her sharply. "The throne had a will?" She nodded once. "It remembers, more than it should." As they crossed the threshold, the Hollow returned, not in the sweeping erasure of before, but in flickers. Words lost mid-sentence. Faces momentarily forgotten. They had forged a bond strong enough to resist total oblivion, but Caervareth was different. Here, the Hollow was anchored. It did not hunt memories, it hoarded them. The Queen stumbled once, gasping, clutching her head. "It's trying to pull me apart. To take what I reclaimed." Omri offered her hand. Hold to us. You are not alone. Together they moved through the fallen halls, each chamber a shrine to ghosts. Rhys saw the court where he'd first sworn fealty, the echo of his own younger voice still lingering. We must reach the High Crown room, he murmured. That's where it resides. Jareth frowned. What does? Rhys hesitated. The throne. Or what's left of it. The deeper they went, the more vivid the visions became. Time blurred. They saw Queen Alia's coronation in the reflection of a broken mirror. Heard the last breath of King Merenth echo from a shattered staircase. Smelled blood spilled in the feasting hall during the War of Three Blades. The hollow didn't erase history here, it trapped it. In every stone, it had preserved sorrow and silence. This place feeds on what we cannot forget, Omri whispered. Not memory, but grief. When they reached the Hall of Campfire, it lay in ruin, the stained glass ceiling collapsed, the throne cracked clean in half. Yet from its broken seat emanated a dark pulse, an invisible heartbeat, slow and insistent. Ilaria stepped forward, her breath catching. It knows we're here. As she approached the throne, a sound like breath across dying coals filled the room. The cracked marble glowed faintly, runes shimmering in forgotten tongues. Rhys reached instinctively for his blade, but this was not a foe that could be cut. The queen placed her hand on the broken armrest. Her eyes rolled back. Her mouth opened, and her voice came not from her, but from something else. I ruled through silence. I was built from blood. I remember every betrayal, every oath, every lie. I am the crown. Her body trembled. Rhys lunged, pulling her hand away. She collapsed, gasping. It's alive, she said. Not as a creature, but as memory given shape. All the rulers who sat here poured their pain into it. I poured mine too. And now it refuses to die. Jareth paced. We can't destroy it with swords. What about fire? Omri shook her head. It's not wood or flesh. It's made of sorrow. Rhys turned to the queen. Can you sever it? Like you tried to sever yourself? Her face paled. I tried to remove myself from history, and nearly erased the world. If I try again here. She trailed off, eyes drawn to the broken steps before the throne. A child's crown rested there, gilded, dented. She picked it up and whispered, This belonged to Prince Corwin. My brother. Her hands trembled. He was meant to rule. But I survived him. The kingdom crowned me with this. The crown flared faintly in her hands. It still remembers him. Rhys stepped forward. Then maybe memory can unbind it. That night, they camped within the ruins. Sleep came fitfully. Rhys dreamed of battles he had never fought, voices he had never known calling his name. Ilaria sat apart from the others, the child's crown cradled in her lap. If I give it back, she asked the stars, what will remain of me? She felt the memory stirring, her brother's laughter, his final words, the blood in the snow. She had buried it all to survive. Now, to unseat the hollow, she had to let it surface. At dawn, the others awoke to find her cloaked in ceremonial garb torn from the old tapestries. I will not erase the crown, she said. I will remember it, and force it to remember who it served. They returned to the Hall of Campfire. Ilaria stepped onto the dais, child's crown in one hand, her voice rising in invocation. By the line of the first flame, by the vow of the 9 queens, by the blood of Corwin and the breath of Alia, I name you not ruler, but servant. The broken throne trembled. Shadows spilled like ink across the stone. Figures rose from them, former rulers, twisted echoes, each bearing the mark of the hollow. You cast us off, one hissed. You broke our legacy. Rhys stood beside Ilaria. You fed the hollow with your cruelty. Your silence became its roots. Omri and Jareth formed a circle. The queen lifted the child's crown. Then let the forgotten judge the forgotten. The circle of runes around the throne ignited. The air shimmered with old power. The shades screamed, not in rage but in grief. Each of them had once ruled in fear, in desperation, in loss. Their memories had clung to the throne, fusing into the hollow's core. Now, confronted with remembrance, they faltered. "We were so afraid," whispered the shade of Queen Velia. "Afraid to be seen. So we became silent." Ilaria stepped forward. "Then let me speak." She placed the child's crown on the broken throne. "Corwin died to save us. I lived to carry that pain. Now I return it to you." Light erupted. Not blinding, but revealing. The throne cracked again, then dissolved. A gust of wind tore through the chamber, lifting dust, tearing through illusions. The shades faded, not destroyed but laid to rest. The hollow, robbed of its core, unraveled. Across Ashvale, the world shifted, villages regained names, rivers reclaimed their stories, old songs returned to lips that had forgotten them. In the ruined city, silence fell, not the dead kind, but a breath held in reverence. Ilaria collapsed to her knees. Rhys caught her. "You did it," he said. She nodded, tears falling freely. "It's not over. But the Hollow has lost its throne." Jareth smiled faintly. "And Ashvale has gained a queen." They buried the child's crown beneath the central plaza. No monument marked the spot. "Let it be remembered not in stone, but in truth," Ilaria said. She swore no new coronation. Instead, she reclaimed her title with no ceremony, no pageantry. "The realm must not forget what silence cost us," she said. She named Jareth captain of the Queen's Guard, and Omri the keeper of words, tasked with restoring history. As for Rhys, she offered him command of the royal shadows again. He declined. "I followed your silence once. Now I will follow your voice." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then speak with me. Rule with me. Not from the throne, but beside the people." Rebuilding began. Fires were lit in the ruined towers. Bridges repaired. Fields tilled. People emerged from fog and doubt, slowly reclaiming lives once lost. In the evenings, the Queen walked the old walls with Rhys, speaking aloud the names of those she remembered. "Each one is a brick," she said. "Not just a person, but a piece of what was taken." Rhys often watched her quietly, knowing that while she was no longer hollowed, her heart would always carry shadows. "That's why you still need me," he said once. "Not as your blade, but as your memory." She smiled, tired but true. "And I will be yours." One evening, a child came to the palace gates holding a torn banner bearing the Ashvale sigil. "This was my grandmother's," she said. She said it helped her remember. The Queen knelt and tied it to the rebuilt spire. "Then it shall help us all." Across the kingdom, fires burn not in fear, but in signal. Stories returned. Old oaths renewed. The Hollow, though weakened, would not vanish entirely. Such magic never does. But its grip was broken. And as Rhys looked to the horizon, he knew the journey was nearing its end. One final truth waited, buried not in the land, but in the stars. The path to the Star Spire was older than Ashvale itself. It wound through crags of forgotten names, where no map dared linger. Rhys, Queen Ilaria, Jareth, and Omri traveled in silence for the first day, the memory of Caervareth still echoing in every footstep. But by the second dawn, the land began to change. Moss grew silver. The wind carried faint murmurs, echoes in a language no one spoke anymore. "This is where the first king walked," Omri whispered, eyes wide with wonder. "Before the kingdoms, before the thrones. He carried no crown, only flame." Ilaria looked to the sky. "Then we follow his fire." They pressed onward, toward the peaks where the stars never set. The journey was perilous. Cliffs gave way beneath snow-covered stone. Storms rolled in without warning, tearing through the ridges with howling gales. At night, they huddled beside a brazier Rhys had salvaged from the ruins. The Queen did not sleep. She watched the stars, murmuring names of rulers long dead, as if tracing their fates and constellations. Jareth kept watch, his blade never sheathed. "Something follows," he said on the fourth night. Rhys nodded. "I've felt it too." A shape moved in the snow, too tall, too silent. But when they turned, it was gone. The hollow's not dead, Rhys muttered. Only dethroned. Still, they climbed. On the 6th morning, they reached the edge of a sheer precipice. Across the chasm, carved into the cliff itself, lay a gate of living stone. Its surface shimmered like water, etched with starlight. This is it, Omri breathed. The vault of flame, where the first king lit the last fire. But the bridge was gone, collapsed centuries ago. Rhys peered down the abyss. No going around. Ilaria stepped forward and whispered. Then we remember the way across. And as she spoke the ancient words she had read in a forgotten scroll, light stirred. Stone formed beneath her feet, each step called forth by memory. They crossed one by one, each step paved with the truth spoken aloud. When Rhys stepped last, he whispered, I once betrayed her. I never forgave myself. The stone accepted him. Inside the vault, heat pulsed like breath. The air shimmered, heavy with incense and old magic. Crystalline flames danced in sconces that had not burned in centuries. At the chamber's center rose a dais, and atop it, a brazier of white flame. The starfire, Omri murmured. Not heat, not hunger, but remembrance. Ilaria approached, her face pale. This is what the first king lit when the world was unmade. The flame he fed with truth. Rhys stepped beside her. Then why have we come? She answered without looking away. To take an oath. One that binds not flesh, but soul. The flame swirled. It knew they had come. And it listened. The queen lifted her hand and placed it in the flame. It did not burn, it revealed. Her memories surfaced like breath on winter glass. Her brother's laughter, her first lie, the day she chose silence over defiance. She wept, but kept her hand there. I am not whole, she said, but I am true. The flame accepted her. Jareth followed. His past was war, blood, duty. He trembled but stood. I have killed for the crown, he said. I will now guard its truth. The flame flickered and bowed. Omri stepped next. She offered knowledge, wonder, doubt. I remember what others forget, she said. That stories are our anchors. The flame rose gently around her hand. Then it was Rhys's turn. Rhys hesitated. He remembered too much. The child he could not save. The order he obeyed that left a village ash. The day he chose to protect the queen by becoming her shadow, and all the light he gave up to do it. I was never noble, he said. Only necessary. The flame did not judge. It only revealed. In its light, he saw the shape of who he had become, not flawless, not faultless, but faithful. He placed his hand within it. The flame surged. A new spark joined the rest. Together they had taken the starborn oath. The flame roared, and the mountain answered. The vault shook. Above them, the ceiling cracked to reveal a sky aflame with constellations. Starlight poured down like rain, illuminating glyphs hidden across the chamber walls. The queen read them aloud. The hollow was born of silence, but the flame was born of grief. The crown is not the seat of power. The memory is. The symbol shifted, no longer mere writing, but a map. This isn't the end, Omri breathed. It's a path. One that leads beyond Ashvale. Beyond the known lands. Rhys stepped forward. Then that's where we go. But Ilaria held up a hand. Not all of us. This path is for the bearer of the starborn flame. One must carry it alone. She turned to Rhys. You were always my shadow. But this road requires a different light. He stepped back. I swore to stay beside you. She smiled softly. And you have. But now I need you to go ahead. Jareth gave him a satchel of dried starroot and mountain rations. Omri pressed a shard of crystal into his hand. This holds the light of the vault. It will guide you. Ilaria stepped close. If you reach the place the map leads to, cast the flame into the sky. We will follow. Rhys nodded slowly, his heart heavier than armor. Then I'll carry it. Until the last shadow is named. He left before dawn. alone, wrapped in a cloak of star thread, the shard burning faintly at his side. The path took him across spires of glass and valleys where time slowed. He saw ancient trees whose roots held ruins of cities never known to Ashvale. He walked across frozen rivers that whispered truths in crackling tones. And all the while, the flame pulsed, guiding, revealing, testing. In dreams, he saw Ilaria, watching the stars from a crumbled balcony, whispering his name. He saw the hollow, still writhing in the forgotten corners of the world, seeking new thrones to seed. And he saw a light, faint, but growing. On the 9th night, he reached the threshold. A stone archway stood between two peaks, its keystone shaped like an open eye. Beyond it lay sky, not clouds, but the raw light of space itself, shimmering in impossible hues. The shard pulsed violently. Rhys stepped through. He was not alone. Figures waited in the void, echoes of those who had taken the starborn oath before. The first king among them, his eyes hollow and bright. "You seek the last name," the king said. "But to name it, you must remember all the rest." Rhys bowed his head. "Then show me. I will not turn away." The void opened. He fell, not down, but through. Through every memory he'd ever touched. The queen's first command. The night his sister died in the fire. The day he learned to lie, to kill, to vanish. He saw the hollow behind each sorrow, not as a monster, but as a consequence. Of silence. Of denial. Of forgetting. When he landed, it was on a plain of stars. There, in the center, a single word burned. The first word ever spoken in Ashvale. A name that held the power to unmake the hollow forever. Rhys reached out. The word seared into his skin, and he understood. "The last shadow," he whispered, "is my own." When Rhys returned, he was changed. No longer a man of shadows, but a bearer of light wrapped in grief. He descended the mountain as starlight broke across Ashvale's edge. Atop the palace, the queen stood waiting. He raised the shard, and cast the flame into the sky. It burst like a second dawn. Across the land, people looked up and remembered. Every name, every loss, every hope. And the hollow recoiled, for memory was no longer its domain alone. As the flames settled, Ilaria whispered, "The crown is broken, the silence undone, and the last oath kept." But one final chapter waited, deep beneath the world, where the hollow's root had never been touched. The sky still burned with the remnants of Rhys's flame as he returned to Ashvale. The light had reawakened the people, names restored, faces softened, children calling their parents by once forgotten titles. But while the hollow was driven from the surface, Rhys knew the root remained. It lingered beneath the soil of memory, buried in the underlands. Ilaria stood beside him on the ramparts, her eyes fixed to the horizon. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked quietly. "Where it sleeps?" Rhys nodded. "Not sleeps, waits. There's a place beneath even the vaults. It's called the Billowing. The first king sealed it shut. That's where the hollow began." The queen closed her eyes. "Then that's where it must end." To reach the Billowing, they would need to pass through the oldest parts of the world, forgotten catacombs that twisted beneath the royal city, through the deep wells, past the buried reliquaries of kings whose names no longer appeared in books. Rhys, Ilaria, Jareth, and Omri gathered their gear in silence. The palace, once cold and vacant, now trembled with the return of memory. Servants sang old lullabies as they cleaned, soldiers repaired banners not flown in decades. Omri hugged a crying child who remembered her mother's lullaby. But below all of it, the hollow stirred. "We must go now," Rhys urged. "Before memory fades again." The descent began. Through winding staircases choked with dust, they passed rooms where stone knights stood guard over crumbling books, where royal ancestors whispered secrets through cracks in the walls. At the 7th gate, Jareth found an altar bearing the crest of the Nameless, an ancient mark that predated even the crown. "This place was never meant to be found," he muttered. "No doors, no light, no return." Ilaria stepped forward and placed her palm on the symbol. It burned, just slightly, before the wall cracked open. "It remembers me," she said. "Even when I forget myself." The path behind them sealed shut. Only forward remained. The air changed. Time lost its grip. They entered halls where their reflections whispered different versions of their lives. Visions of what might have been. Rhys saw himself as a farmer, hand in hand with a faceless wife. Ilaria saw herself crowned, cold-eyed and distant, ruling without joy. "These are not memories," Omri murmured. "They're temptations." The hollow fed on forgotten possibilities, on the ache of might-have-beens. "Ignore them," Rhys said, drawing his blade. "They're shadows. We've faced worse." As they pressed on, the walls turned from stone to bone. Ancient carvings told a story, a people who erased themselves rather than face grief. The first hollow. At the final threshold stood a massive stone door, veined with black crystal and sealed by silence itself. No key, no lock, only absence. "This is the route," Ilaria whispered. "And it will not let us pass while we still carry names." She looked at Rhys. "We must give them up. Just for a time. To pass as hollow, and descend unseen." Rhys's jaw tightened. "And if we forget completely? Then we were never meant to win," she said simply. One by one, they stepped forward. Omri placed her name into a silver thread, tucked into her journal. Jareth spoke his into a shard of steel. Ilaria touched her own throat, and Rhys, finally, whispered his into his glove. The door opened. Inside was darkness, not absence of light, but a consuming pressure. It felt like being unmade with each step. Voices called out to them, mothers, lovers, dead friends. The hollow was not loud. It was intimate. It offered peace. Simplicity. "No pain," it whispered. "Only stillness." Rhys stumbled, clutching his glove, the name inside pulsing faintly. Ilaria reached out, her hand finding his. "Hold on," she whispered. "To me. To us." They pressed forward until the chamber widened into a massive cavern. In its center floated a heart of crystal, black, cracked, weeping mist. "The root," Omri said in awe. "It remembers everything we tried to forget." The root pulsed with anti-light, each beat a memory lost from someone, somewhere. Rhys saw a mother forgetting her child's laughter, a knight losing the name of his homeland, a scholar unable to read her own writing. "It feeds on pain," Ilaria murmured. "Pain no one wants to carry." Jareth stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "Then we must carry it. All of it." But even as he approached, the hollow lashed out. Tendrils of fog slithered forward, wrapping his legs, his mind. He dropped to his knees, eyes wide. "I remember nothing," he gasped. "I was never born." Rhys leapt forward, driving his blade into the mist. "You were my brother in arms," he shouted. "And you still are." The blade glowed, faintly at first, then blinding. It was not steel that struck the hollow. It was memory, sharpened by truth. Rhys pulled Jareth free, Omri chanting from her journal, her forgotten name guiding them like a star. Ilaria stepped to the root, raising her hand. "You were made to erase," she said. "But even you cannot erase all." She pressed her palm to the crystal, and it cracked. A scream, terrible, ancient, wordless, shook the cavern. The hollow writhed. Rhys knew the moment had come. He stepped beside her. "Give it the last shadow," he said. "Mine!" Ilaria hesitated. "You'll forget everything. Then remind me," he said. Together, they pressed Rhys's name, wrapped in the glove, into the root. It dissolved, and with it, his memories unraveled. He fell to his knees, eyes empty, mouth forming a question he didn't know how to ask. The hollow surged, but not to consume. It recoiled. For the first time, someone had given willingly what it always stole. And in that offering, its power cracked. Omri raised her journal, her voice breaking. "Your name was Rhys. You were a guard. You were loyal. You loved," the queen whispered. "You were mine." The hollow howled. The cavern collapsed inward. Light poured from every crack. and Rhys, slowly, began to remember. The root shattered. Its fragments dissolved into mist, not of forgetting, but of healing. The lost names returned to the earth, etched into wind, stone, water. Above them, Ashvale stirred. Across the kingdom, those who had once wandered hollow-eyed now wept in recognition. The spell was undone. Ilaria turned to Rhys. "Do you know me?" she asked, her voice fragile. He blinked, brow furrowed. "I remember a flame. A vow. A crown I never touched. And you." She smiled. "That's enough." Omri collapsed in tears, Jareth clutching her shoulder. The hollow was gone, not slain, but understood. Grief, once faced, could no longer rule. They climbed for 2 days back to the surface. Sunlight met them like an old friend. Ashvale's people greeted them with flowers, with songs of names returned. Statues of nameless kings now bore inscriptions. The palace gates no longer creaked. Children called the queen by her full name, Ilaria Starborn. But Rhys remained quiet. His memories had not all returned. He sat at the edge of the courtyard, staring at the stars. "I gave everything," he said. Ilaria sat beside him. "And still you are here." He turned to her. "Who am I now?" She took his hand. "The man who chose to remember. Even if it broke him." Night fell over a kingdom restored. Bonfires were lit in every square. Bells rang with names, old, new, once forgotten. Ilaria stood before her people, no crown on her brow, no scepter in hand. "I will not rule by blood," she said, "but by memory, by truth." They cheered. Rhys stood behind her, no longer a shadow, but a sentinel of light. Omri opened a new book, blank pages waiting for stories yet untold. Jareth joined the city guard, now protectors of names. The hollow was gone, but its lesson remained. As the queen looked to the stars, she whispered, "1 chapter more, and then we rest." Rhys nodded. "The last light. The last vow." Ashvale's dawn broke like a whispered promise. The kingdom stirred beneath a sky flushed with rose and gold, its people rising from the shadows of loss and silence. The streets buzzed with renewed life, vendors shouted names, children laughed, and bells tolled, carrying melodies long forgotten. Yet atop the palace, Rhys and Queen Ilaria stood quietly, their faces worn but resolute. The hollow had been shattered, the root broken, but the echo of its curse lingered. "We have undone much," Ilaria said softly, eyes tracing the horizon. "But to heal truly, we must face the final truth." Rhys nodded. "The crown of echoes. The seat of our legacy. Where all memory converges." They turned toward the throne room, where the final test awaited. The chamber was transformed. No longer a place of cold stone and forgotten power, it breathed with warmth, walls adorned with tapestries woven from names, voices, and stories reclaimed. At its center stood the crown of echoes itself, an ornate circlet wrought of silver and crystal, glowing faintly with starlight. As Ilaria stepped forward, the crown pulsed, an echo of every ruler who had ever worn it, every story bound to its metal. Rhys felt a chill. This was not merely a crown, it was a vessel, a repository of Ashvale's collective memory. To claim it was to accept the weight of the past, the burden of every forgotten soul. Ilaria lifted the crown with reverence. "This crown was forged to bind rulers to their people," she said. "But it became a prison, trapping memories until they turned hollow." She turned to Rhys. "We can reclaim it. But only together." Rhys stepped beside her, heart pounding. "Then let us bear the weight, so others never have to." They approached the throne, the crown's glow growing brighter, weaving threads of light that entwined their hands. As they placed the circlet upon Ilaria's brow, a wave of voices swept through the chamber. Whispers, laughter, tears, the echoes of generations. The hollow stirred in resistance, but their bond was stronger, built from truth and loyalty. Suddenly, the room darkened. Shadows flickered and twisted, forming shapes, faces from the hollow's grasp, twisted in sorrow and rage. "You cannot hold us," they hissed, reaching out with ethereal hands. But Rhys stood firm, drawing upon the loyalty that had sustained him, the single shard of identity that had never been hollowed. "We remember you," he said, voice steady. "Not to bind you, but to free you." Illyria's eyes glowed with renewed power. "You are not forgotten. But we will not let your pain consume us." Together, they summoned light that shattered the shadows, transforming them into sparks that scattered like stars. The crown of echoes shimmered, its weight both heavy and light, as if embracing every joy and sorrow alike. Illyria stood taller, the queen reborn, not as a ruler of silence, but as a beacon of remembrance. Rhys felt his own identity solidify, no longer fragmented but whole, a shadow no more, but a guardian. The chamber filled with warmth, and the voices shifted from echoes to songs, chants of hope, renewal, and unity. Outside, the kingdom responded in kind. Bells rang louder, fires burned brighter, and people embraced with tears and laughter mingled. Yet beneath the joy, Rhys sensed a deeper peace, a truth that the Hollow's lesson was not simply to restore memory, but to honor the cost of forgetting. He turned to Illyria. "We carry their stories, but we must also carry their pain." She nodded solemnly. "The crown is a reminder that memory is both gift and burden." Omri stepped forward, holding her journal aloft. "Our stories will be written anew, never to be lost again." Jareth, now captain of the guard, stood vigilant by the doors, symbolizing protection not just of the throne, but of the people's truths. Days passed, and Ashvale flourished. Festivals celebrated the return of names and histories. Schools taught children the old stories alongside new ones. The kingdom breathed as one, a tapestry woven from countless threads of memory. Illyria and Rhys walked the city together, listening to voices restored and futures dreamed. "What now?" Rhys asked quietly. She smiled. "Now we build a kingdom where no one is lost. Where shadows are honored, but never feared." Their hands clasped, a promise not of power, but of partnership. One evening, beneath a canopy of stars, Rhys and Illyria climbed to the highest tower. The crown of echoes rested safely in the royal vault, its power contained but never forgotten. "The hollow was a shadow of fear," Illyria said softly. "But we are the light of remembrance." Rhys nodded. "And together, we keep that light alive." The stars above twinkled in silent approval, constellations bearing witness to the kingdom's rebirth. But even as peace settled, whispers of distant lands reached Ashvale, places untouched by the Hollow's curse, yet bound by their own shadows. Rhys understood that their journey was part of a greater story. "The last shadow may be named here," he said, "but the story goes on." Illyria's gaze was steady. "Then we will be ready. Together." In the heart of the palace, a new tradition began. The Festival of Echoes, where every year, the people came to honor those lost to forgetting, and those who remembered for all. Songs were sung, names called aloud, and stories shared by firelight. Rhys stood among the crowd, no longer hidden but honored, a symbol of loyalty and memory. Illyria watched from the throne room window, knowing that true power came not from a crown, but from the echoes of hearts united. The kingdom thrived in a balance of light and shadow. The Hollow's memory remained a solemn lesson, a whispered warning in the wind. And as Rhys and Illyria looked to the future, they vowed never to let silence rule again. Their story was one of shadows and light, woven together, inseparable. In the end, it was not the crown that defined them, but the echoes they chose to carry. As night settled over Ashvale, Rhys stood beneath the stars, feeling the weight of memory settle gently in his chest. The last shadow was named, not as a mark of loss, but as a beacon of hope. The kingdom of Ashvale was no longer hollow. It was whole. And the echoes of their journey would live on, in every name, every story, every heart. The king's last shadow had finally found its light,